Thank you. That's a terrible bio. I have to really rewrite it and say something about how much I love architecture and urbanism, because that's more important. And I also want to say I'm impressed how disciplined you are, because it's nice and sunny outside, and inside it's dark. I would probably maybe selected the sun instead. I'll try to show you some sun, but let's start with something dark. Normally, I start my lectures by telling how MVRDV is a multidisciplinary architecture office that works on tiniest scale and on really large-scale urbanism and everything in between, and that we don't want to be this specialist architect that you talk about, but we want to do everything. Oh, yes. So this morning we woke up in the Netherlands to this news that a populist party has become the biggest in the Senate. So we have now a party that has become the biggest party of the Netherlands that is actually denying climate change. They say it doesn't exist. And why do people vote for them? Because then they say, oh, we don't have to spend money on it. So that's terrible. So therefore I changed the start of the lecture. The good news is that kids, and among them my son, are actually on strike because of that, and they continuously demonstrate because they know that we transform the planet, and not in a good way. And this is very important also for us, because the building industry is responsible for 1/3 of global emissions, and we have to basically change it. And at MVRDV we always tried that from the day we were born, if you want. We always knew about the warning of the Club of Rome, and we always wanted to have this sustainable in our work. We also think that even though the word sustainable is overused, it's still there. It's very, very important. Don't turn it into semantics, but make everything sustainable. And here we have the World Expo. That was one of the projects we did, where we stacked Dutch landscapes on top of each other. So the 5th floor is a forest, and the roof you have a dike and windmills. So we created artificial nature in a building, and we keep doing that everywhere. Here you see the 5th floor. It's still growing, even though the building by now is a ruin 18 years later. It's going to be refurbished into a university soon, but yeah, so this is very pragmatic for us, this building. We know that this urban sprawl causes emissions. We know that the basics already can really cause a lot of damage. If you live like that in this kind of Dutch suburb, you have a wonderful life. The car is in front of your house. You have 2 gardens, nice neighbors, and everything. Life laughs at you, but at the same time, if you want to buy a newspaper, you have to take the car and get it, because the way that this is planned is already really, really bad for the environment. Even if all these buildings would be energy efficient, which they are not, this would be bad. This would be better. Hong Kong, Manhattan, these places that are really dense are pretty good, but do we want to live like that? So for us, this somewhere in between these 2 extremes we work. And we think about it. So this is the Y Factory, a think tank we have at Delft University of Technology, where we are allowed to dream about the city of the future. It doesn't always have to be scientific. We can really come up with design research, make all kinds of scenarios for the future, and we love data to start with, so we crunch data a lot. But let me get first back to Domus. Domus was a magazine that was maybe like a paper version of the zine, which is slow. So you see the projects first on the zine, then later you see them in Domus 2, 3, 4 months later. And they asked us to be a guest editor for 1 year. Winnie Maas is the guest editor-in-chief. I'm his deputy. And we turned it into a more activist platform. For example, we have now in this March issue, we have an article about how global mining is affecting the planet. Now that for the readers of Domus is a bit weird, because they expected a nice villa instead of this kind of damage. And we also talk about the protests, and one of the kids there is the son of Winnie Maas, trying to stop the German mining industry. And we have, again, data that shows how much we actually damage the planet with all kinds of mining. So more activists. We also talk about the influence of China in the world, make it more visible what is happening. We talk about how rich people steal the coast in Lagos. We have a former colleague there who spotted this and saw it. And we also talk about mediocrity. I already said that now during lunch, sorry. But what architects often do, they talk about on a very high level, but we never really talk about all the mediocre shit that is built every day all around us. If any one of us would want to build a holiday home in Tuscany, we would have to apply very strict construction rules to make it look like an Italian house. If Lidl comes to build something in Tuscany, they can build whatever they like. They make exactly the same building that they also make in Hamburg. And here we have devoted actually, I think, 16 pages to this supermarket thing that is happening all over the world. And here we only showed Italy in its supermarkets in all these ugly boxes that are built everywhere and nobody ever talks about it, and we're trying to talk about it. But we're also optimists. In the months of Brexit, we talk about could we make the EU less exclusive and more inclusive and actually have a planet Europe. The EU is based on human rights, on all kinds of democratic principles. What would happen if we would just extend it and let Australia, Mongolia, and maybe even Israel and Chile join? So we like to think these things through in a bit different way, and it really rattles the readers of Domus, we believe. But of course, we need to transform the construction industry because we are part of this global emission. At the Y Factor, we have done this research book. It's a big book, you can read it. I will only talk about one small thing, which is maybe aesthetic. Green buildings can be quite ugly. And they are especially ugly because they have these additions. When I was in Bochum to give a lecture, I looked at this building. And even though the Germans are really good with the Energiewende, this is maybe not the way how we're going to win it. And also, this is not the way. If we make these houses that actually, these facades that have 30% glass, is this architecture that is loved? Is this architecture that will last in the future? If you walk out here into Vienna, there's all this beautifully decorated architecture. And if anybody would want to remove one of these buildings, there would probably be a public outcry. If these buildings will be removed in 30 years, we wonder whether there will be a public outcry. So basically, with this kind of sustainable architecture, we might create the problems of the future. How else could we do it? Maybe I'll show you one small example how we're trying to do it. I'll take you to Spijkenisse, which is in the Netherlands. It's a dock worker community outside of Rotterdam. It used to be a village in the 1930s. Then it was demolished in the 60s to make way for roads and modern construction. Factories. In the 70s, they built social housing quite a bit. In the 80s, they built social housing, but a bit more cozy. In the 90s, they built social housing that should look like offices. It's, you know, the changing taste of the Dutch. And at a certain moment, there were 70,000 people living there, and the statistics were against Spijkenisse. Not a poor place, but in terms of culture, education, and attractiveness to live, very, very low, one of the lowest in the Netherlands. So they had a revolution, not a populist, but a good populist revolution. They basically replaced the Social Democratic Party with a new Social Democratic Party that has as its only raison d'être Spijkenisse, so they wanted to reform the place, and they did. So they built all the bridges that you can find on the euro banknotes. Then they built themselves a medieval shopping center, which works very well. A very fancy theater, like a UFO from UN Studio was added. And they had a highlight when the girlfriend of the famous DJ Afrojack came to visit Spijkenisse. You might know her, it's Paris Hilton. She went to the local snack bar and had a salad, which is not normally sold there, but for Paris Hilton they made it. This place actually wanted to have a library, and the special problem with Spijkenisse is that 10% of the population are illiterate. It's one of the highest percentages in the Netherlands. These are people that work in the port, they don't really need to read. How do you build a library in such a place, and how should it look like? So here is our dream, also very social democratic perhaps in a way. This is the typical couple from Spijkenisse watching telly. And then at a certain moment they walk out into the village and they see a book mountain, a really big book mountain. And they are amazed, what is it? I like it. Then they start to climb it. And then they are surrounded by books and knowledge. And then they return home and they become intellectuals and the television is gone. So this is the ideal of the society that can be made. It's, yeah, we're halfway. So one of the challenges in Spijkenisse was that they have very peculiar ideas about public buildings. Public building normally is a building that creates more culture. And a commercial building is a building that generates profit. Whereas in Spijkenisse they like to combine the two. Whenever there is money for culture, they should also deliver money. So here you see the Spijkenisse Art Center, which is on top of the Apple Store. If you ask anybody in Spijkenisse, where is the art center, they don't know. They know all where the Apple Store is. So basically the art center loses. That's the entrance to the art center. It's not very inspiring. But they wanted us to do exactly the same. So here is the diagram then basically says that culture loses. At least it loses in all kinds of ways, and it's then not seen. We didn't want that. But we also had to start with a supermarket, and then some offices to rent out, and then offices for the library and a film house, and then the chess club and the bridge club. They all needed places. And we noticed that not all of this program needed a lot of windows, so basically we put them on top of each other in a pyramid, and on top of the pyramid we have the library. So this is how we made this building. And in this way, then hopefully we generate money commercially, but we also still have a building that is recognizable as a public building and not as an Apple Store. And this is how we were allowed to build it. Here you see the Spijkenisse Book Mountain. Inside, a book mountain made out of recycled plastic shelves. These used to be black boxes. You know, in Holland we have a lot of agriculture in greenhouses, and if you melt that plastic, you end up with these bookshelves. And then from the outside, you see this. It was designed as an advertisement for reading, so that the people of Spijkenisse have the biggest book mountain in the country. And of course, there's an issue with the sun, but I will come back to that later. We also had a bit of urban planning. We had to connect old and new. There was a little bit left of the old village, the church, and on the other side a new neighborhood. They also asked us to add 47 social houses. So this was suddenly the situation, the church, the social housing, the library, and then we said we connected all with a layer of brick. Wienerberger, yes. So then that is actually how it ended up. Everything was covered on this blanket of brick. It's everywhere, it's inside, it's outside, it's behind the bookshelves. But here we actually glued the brick to a metal plate that is good for acoustics in the library. This is when the sponsor faints. We also put it on the doors and on the ceilings when necessary, because the library, of course, was outside. It was basically on top of this pyramid. Yeah, we also had to somehow protect it from the rain. That's a bit of an issue with books. They don't like rain. So first we wanted to have this snowball effect. That wasn't allowed. They had some building regulations that nothing could be taller than the church. And we made a master plan that basically looks like a farm, a big farm where the barn is the library and the social housing would be the farmhouses. And we put it underneath this wooden hood. A lot of glass carried by wood. It's the biggest wooden span in the Netherlands. It's almost 50 meters and built with very old-fashioned technology. Of course, you know that in Austria you're much better with this. And of course, I don't have to remind you, it's a CO2 depot, which is very good for the environment as well. So here you see how we did it. The city wanted to have a sustainable building, and we wanted to have an open glass box, so that you could see the books. How can you then combine these two things? That was a bit of a calculation miracle for Arkadis, our engineer. They had to find a way. And the city also didn't want to have any experiments. They said, we don't want to have a technology that doesn't work. You have to sell us something that has been proven in other buildings. And so what we did in the end, we looked at this glass, and the glass is very cold in winter and very hot in summer. If you then just change the two, then you're done. So in winter, you harvest cold, that you can cool the building. In summer, you harvest heat, and it's very simple. We also have fig trees and all kinds of other things, phase-changing materials. There's a lot in it, and the idea is that you don't see it. Even the sprinkler system is used for this, so that has a double function, and it's all hidden as much as possible. So it's not like the Expo, which wants to scream out, I'm green. This one is just a very good building. It only uses up a little bit of electricity. Then we have the psychology of the mountain. As I said, you're supposed to go up and then be manipulated to read. So here, if you walk up, first of all, you have to look for the elevator. So without noticing, you actually walk 5 floors. Many people do that. We have put in very lazy German stairs instead of the very steep Dutch stairs. So that is to make it a bit easier for people. And then when they are up, they are surrounded by books, and the books are also displayed with the front covers often, so that people get the idea, I want to read. They end up on the top. There is a restaurant, and because the Netherlands is not a really religious society, you can also get married there. So that's very nice. So this is Spijkenisse's most frequented marriage place these days. And the first marriage we had, very Dutch, was these 2 ladies who got married, and they brought all their grown-up kids, and one of the kids wants to be an architect, so we invited him to the office to tell him how it's done. Now, this is only scratching the surface of the story of this building. We actually made a book about it with hundreds of pages, because all these architecture projects, they are so deep, they have so many stories, and here I can speak for 1 hour, which is super luxurious and long, but I cannot really go into these details. Certainly not for this one. It's a crazy story, but I will only show you a little bit of it. I bring you to China, to Tianjin. Binhai means sea coast, and they wanted to have a big library and the library was a present from the leader of the Politburo. He would leave in 3 years, and he wanted to leave behind a legacy of cultural buildings. So he asked the German architects GMP to make a master plan, and so there was, between the first sketch and the completion, 3 years. So this was the master plan by GMP. They made it easy for the architects, a few boxes, and we were invited to have one of the boxes. The client said, I want to have a large library, 30,000 square meter, and I want to have a bowl-shaped auditorium. So, okay, why not? At that moment, Europe was in a crisis. We didn't ask too many questions about it. We're just happy. Great, we have a library. And we designed, and as we designed, they kind of liked it, but then they reconsidered our position. They saw that we are good architects, so they put us in the front of the building. So we had to change, after a few months, basically, we had to change location, move to this, and by that time they had already excavated. So, yes, the excavation started. This is the logic of the building. We go up in the German box, and we cannot do anything else. Then we have the bowl. We roll the ball inside the space. The space makes a bit of space around the ball. You can see through. We have this beautiful auditorium that connects everything inside. And then we let daylight enter. And that's basically the concept. Yes, we had like a week for this, so it was a bit hasty. But still, we managed to design it in a way that you have spaces to talk, you have spaces to look, and you have spaces to read. And everything was designed as a big bookshelf, and this was our design actually. So the lower parts you could just go and grab the books, and the upper parts you would grab the books from the other side, from the offices. So if you can see it, these books you would get from here. So that was the design. Then it all happened. They just continued building, and even though we have an office in China, we cannot be there every day, and things move rapidly. So before you know it, oh, fine, great, the ball is there. This is how it actually went. And they really wanted to realize this, so that was very good. But before we know it, they couldn't build the upper parts of our atrium because that was too difficult for them. So they made it more in a way that is decorative. And without consulting us, they printed books on the shelves. So yes. So we were a bit angry. And devastated, and we went there to look at it, and we couldn't believe that this was done to us. And so you see here the difference between the real books here, and all this is printed. You can imagine what people wrote on the internet, fake books for China and stuff like that. And so basically the books that are forbidden in China are printed and so on. So quite a lot of things were said, but it was all unintentional by the client, by the core architect, by us. This is just part of this incredible speed that the Chinese sometimes have. And then in the end, they opened the library, and it's frequented by 15,000 people a day, which in the beginning was a bit of a challenge because they only had 150,000 books. So basically every visitor could select it from 10 books and take some. But in the meantime, as in China happens, things go fast, so also buying the books was quite fast, and now the library is actually working quite well, and it's one of the first new big libraries that they have made there. Yeah. And you see here how it's used. And then from the inside, from the German master plan, you can actually see the ball. The ball is also a big television. For the pictures, we switched it off because we don't like that too much, but they have like really wild flowers and stuff all the time. Typical Chinese style, very, very sweet in any case. And the library director is super proud of his building, that it brings so many people to the library to actually read instead of, also always with the telephone. So it's actually, paper is the thing here. Skyscrapers I need to talk to you about because they're super important also in Vienna these days. But is there a European skyscraper? We wondered, because skyscrapers these days are of course Asian and American typologies. How do they look in Europe? Here you see all the skyscrapers of the Netherlands. Yeah, we have a lot in Rotterdam, as you can see, but then if you compare them to the skyscrapers in Asia, you see that our skyscrapers are basically only the plinth of the Asian skyscraper. So if we call something a skyscraper, it means that the sky in Europe is much lower than the sky in Asia. The typology of the skyscraper we like in a way because it adds a lot of density to the city, and I told you density is good. But it also works a bit like a Dyson. It just hoovers out all the life, and it brings it up vertically, and then there's nothing. You can only go up and down. You can look out. Maybe you don't know your neighbors. How can we change it? We built this one in Lego, and then we changed one Lego stone to this. Now suddenly you have an address halfway through. You can go outside. You can turn around. You can tell your neighbor to have a beer or have a barbecue and stuff like that. And that for us is the European version of the skyscraper, that you actually mix maybe European values in terms of human scale, Italian mountain village, social things, that you mix all that together with this typology. Then we script it and we get skyscrapers that look a bit more like an Italian village, perhaps, if you have a lot of fantasy, and you can follow me here. So these outside spaces, the possibility to see each other and all these things. Now, this is a project we did at Delft University. It's called Porous City. Lego was so kind to send us 1 million Lego stones. So we built quite a few of these, actually, of these beautiful towers at the Y Factory. We couldn't make them taller because they could kill students, so this was basically it. What we could do in terms of height, so they also look a bit compact, almost like a building regulation in a European city. And yeah, we weren't done with this. These towers, by the way, you can now see in the Centre Pompidou in Paris. So we did more research into the European tower, and at the moment then we had 350. We also wanted to build them. Call Denmark, Lego, can you send us more? How much? 1 million, okay. They said okay, and then we built another 350 towers and made this research. And now, of course, after all this research, what do you do with it? Then we have to make it, right? So that's the idea of research, that you actually can use it later. And so this is, I show you one scripting model. This is 80 different scripts for one tower, where we have acoustics, facade panels, amount of windows, the different rooms, the following order, but also outside spaces, view, daylight, all these things we put into it. We made a design, then we put all these things into the computer program and asked the computer, calculate it out, which ones are the best, and then you end up, well, the red one is really, really bad. The yellow ones, they're kind of in between, they're good in one thing, and the dark green ones, like this one, is really good. And so we basically had a look at them, combined them, and now we're building this tower in Amsterdam, where you can see we have retail, then we have a few office floors, and then on top, very human scale facade, outside facades designed with gardens by Piet Oudolf, alpine gardens up here in the Netherlands. So they have different climate zones, and this is hopefully something that reacts to this idea of wanting to have more individuality in a tower. Around the central tower you can walk, there is public space. This is also how we won the competition, so it's going to be an open tower in that sense. And this is the most important thing. You can go outside, you can have a barbecue, you can look back to your neighbors on this side, on that side, invite them to have a beer, and then build a community, basically. Now, this is a very expensive building, that's why it was feasible. We're also trying to do this for the middle classes in Rotterdam. In this tower, you see the bay windows, they also have this kind of function. A little bit less perhaps, but also here we try in Vienna at the Gasometer, Turm mit Taille, where we have outside spaces in the lower part that hopefully have a connection with the city. And then we build really big pieces of three-dimensional city in Asia. This is in Shenzhen, a megastructure. Excavation again has started, so maybe they will also print books somewhere. And then here we have a twin tower in Taipei. Also here, the three-dimensional city is very important for us to actually see how far up the escalators go, to actually move life up and interaction and a more social space. Yeah, so this is what we dreamed. In fact, this is a vertical suburban street with lots of small houses. But again, here the architect told the people what to do and what's good for them. Wouldn't it be nicer if the people could decide it themselves? So I'm not sure whether you have ever bought a kitchen at IKEA, but there is a program that is the IKEA Kitchen Designer. Would it not be nice if you go to the website of a project developer and then you have the Vienna apartment designer and you can design your own apartment? That's something we tried also at the university. We call it First Ego City, where we have 17 architects and 17 clients. You see the big Lebowski is in between, but also somebody who likes the roller coasters and Marilyn Manson. So not the most easy people. And then the students started to design the dream houses of these, pixelated them into to raster so it can actually be used in the software. The software then finds a way to mediate and to find compromises between all these different wishes and puts them all together in one rational tower. And then you have from Ego City, you go to We Go City, we go all together. And this is maybe also what's happening in the Baugruppen a little bit. And hopefully with this new software, this is not going to be too far away. So if this is not too far away, then what will be after that? We always look further and what else can we do? Now we have built the first option here at Dutch Design Week, was occupied by students for a while, was very lovely. But it has a flaw. People will leave that in the morning, like this morning I left my house, I came here, house is empty. So what to do with the house? Would it not be cooler if we get rid of the house altogether while I'm out and that somebody else uses it as an office? What if we say goodbye to steel, glass, bricks, sorry, Wienerberger, and we replace them all with nanotechnology? And we have in these environments where we wake up, maybe in a bedroom, then we tell the bedroom to become bigger because I need more space in the morning, and then I leave the apartment and my personal space just moves away. Now this might look a bit dystopian, but it could also be cool. Imagine you have a little bit of nanotech, and it is in the morning it's a house by Frank Lloyd Wright, in the evening it's a Victorian mansion, and we're trying to realize that at the university. So we have a carpet that can morph into a desk. So it's very, very, very early age. It's a bit like the first tests of flying, but between this airplane and the jet was only 50 years. So maybe we get there. And if we don't get there, it doesn't matter. At least we're trying, and there will be a lot of innovation on our way. Also, suburbs deserve a little bit of attention. Maybe you have been to Amsterdam recently. It's very, very successful. We have lots of tourists. It's not affordable anymore. Everybody wants to live there. Right next to Amsterdam, you have a new town called Almere, and nobody wants to live there. So the city councillor asked us to come up with a plan to change the demography, to change the future of Almere. How do you do that? How do you get people that are higher educated into Almere, so that Almere becomes not a suburb, but a more diversified city? So we looked at it and we thought about, would we like to live there? And we decided maybe not. But what would make us want to live in this place? That was the question. And then we thought maybe we can offer people more freedom. In the Netherlands we have an enormous amount of rules. We are master of rules. We put rules everywhere. And so what if we have a rule-free zone in Almere? Yeah, how would that look? And we wanted to be kind of suburban and green. Then maybe there would be big developments. We said, okay, let's make some rules like in SimCity. You work with percentages. So you have almost 60% for food production. That's a suburbia that takes responsibility. It still produces food, and you cannot build too much here. So basically it will remain green. And then you can do that either on your own. So you can do the entire plot on your own, or you find other people that maybe built a house and a farmer will do the gardening for you. And then the very special issue to attract these people was to give them freedom. So they could buy a very big plot for very little money. The money is the land is state-owned, so you basically get a big present on behalf of the taxpayers. That wasn't right, because here in Almere, you also have to take responsibility. The city, other than in everywhere else in the Netherlands, will not build your road. It will not bring you electricity. It will not bring you water. It will not take your water away. It will not do anything with garbage. There will be no bus and no school. You want freedom. You want to buy here. Then you have to do everything yourself. That is also freedom, that you can take responsibility for your own neighborhood. So this is how we thought it could happen. Totally free. This is our plan, but it's not a plan, it's only a system. And to our big joy, the first 150 homes are now inhabited. People actually like the plan, they do it, and it attracts people that really want some freedom. Sometimes alternative people, sometimes people who don't like rules, and they have learned to build roads, for example. It's not that easy, actually. So this is the existing road. Then there's the first, that's very easy. Second setback has to build a little road, and then more people will come and they start building the road all together, because then they can share. Now this is all kind of easy. Now they want gas, and the gas company will not put a gas line into the road. That is private property. So they have to now make a road building corporation that actually is responsible for this road. So all these people together are owner of a road building corporation, so that they can get electricity and so on. And then the next thing starts, difficult people. They want to have a different plot, bigger, and the road has to take a bend, which is against Dutch nature. We like straight lines instead of quirky things. So, and then somebody else. So now how do you calculate the amount, the percentage that this person has to pay for all that road? So they had endless commissions and committees and discussions. So first we thought maybe this would attract people that are kind of not so social, because they want to create their own life. But in the end, they all had to create community, because they had to really work with their neighbors. Otherwise, they could never afford to live all the way out here with a big road. So that was kind of a nice surprise. These are the difficult people. They had a dream of, they wanted to have a big plot so that they can have wine. So soon you will have a Riesling from Amsterdam. Not sure whether it's going to be good, but you can always hope. And what many people noticed is that it's really difficult to work with the electricity companies, so they're trying to not work with it and have homes that are off the grid. Quite a few homes are not on the grid, but off the grid. And because they didn't want to bring their children into a school with the car, they made their own school in a Mongolian tent, as you can see. And I show you the school toilet, that's this thing. So it looks very bad, but in fact it has a filter system. So it's not a plumpsklo, but it's a pretty good toilet. Then we have this guy who always wanted to live in a park all his life. And here in Almere, he bought himself a very big plot. And he keeps it open for everybody. So he now lives in a park, and all the neighbors, they can enjoy it. And in terms of architecture, you can do whatever you like. There are no building regulations. The city inspector will come to check whether it's safe, but they will not tell you what to do. You can live in a container if you feel like it. Fancy bungalow is fine, but also a very traditional house. And if you want something really different, then it's also possible. This couple built themselves an industrial hall, because they want to live in their camper van. So basically that's an indoor camping. And this is how they want to live, and this is how they want to dry the garlic and onions. So this is basically what works. Now then we were called by the mayor of Mannheim, and he said, yeah, I have the same problem as Almere. I have a very cool neighbor, Heidelberg, and all my young people, they run there, but I have a lot of space. What to do with the space? So we told him, what about no rules? Well, he wasn't so sure about it, whether that would work in Germany. So first we looked, where do the people go in Mannheim? So here you see, this is Bahnstadt Mannheim. They built these rabbit cages for people. Takes you 30 years to pay for it. Then you live there. If your kid wants to go out, you have to go with the kid out, because the car is still the boss. Even though it's kind of a nice street, it's still a car environment. So we said to the mayor, why don't you build a nice child-friendly neighborhood with a lot of freedom for the people? Freedom, I'm not so sure. So we went to Mannheim to look at the places where people built themselves. And what we saw is that if you give Germans a lot of freedom, they don't really basically use it. So it all looks a bit the same. And we saw street after street of the same, and it was all built in a time there were not too heavy regulations. So then we said, yeah, Mayor, I think you're right, you need rules. We make you rules. Then, for example, the rule here could be that you cannot do the same like your neighbor. So we designed with this catalog house manufacturer, they normally do these things. We designed them an entire catalog of new homes, and then the rule is you can find a few friends, like 4 max, and you do the same house, but then everybody around you has not the same rights anymore. You cannot build the same houses again. And what you see here also in the neighborhood, no cars. So here the kids, they can go outside, lots of houses overlook the place, and your kids, even if they're really young, they can walk out and it's safe for them. They will hopefully not be killed by a car. At least cars are not allowed in there. So the car city is also something that we are continuously working with. More and more we're making these mobility studies for car makers and for airplane companies, because there is a lot of change coming up. What does it mean for the city? But I can't show that yet. I can just show you what happens if we remove the car. Here is a project we're doing for a neighborhood community in The Hague. We were asked, this is the old city center of The Hague, which was demolished for a large part to make way for a motorway in the 1960s. And The Hague had wonderful canals like Amsterdam. Here you see one of them that was turned into this kind of surrounding, all car-based. And you see that this once was a shopping street in the 1920s, but all the shops are gone. Nobody wants to be there. Also, this kind of environment turned into this. So The Hague didn't really keep the the history in a good way. And now we're basically saying, why don't you bring the water back? It doesn't cost you a lot because it used to be there, so the city is still in a way that you can bring it back. And then with this water might come a lot of activity. We think it might. They have tested it a little bit, and we think that when you bring the water back, you bring back a lot of initiative, because we rather sit, all of us, we rather sit next to the water and we see boats and ducks and not the cars pass by. And we also tested that in reality. So here you see the biggest development that was ever built in one go in Norway. There was a lot of protest and a lot of fear. 360,000 square meters in one go. Oh my God. In China, that's one building. But in Norway, that is a big thing. Right next to Central Station. The city of Oslo was really worried that it would cause a lot of traffic. And then we found a solution all together, the developer, the tenants, and so on. What would happen if we wouldn't put parking places in? Then you cannot have cars. So that's what happened. So we created 12,500 workplaces, 450 apartments, and only 20 temporary parking spots. So that is actually makes the buildings much better to build, easier to build, faster, and it prevents 110,000 kilometers of car journey inside the city. The entire city benefits because of this master plan. Of course, that doesn't work everywhere, but right next to a central station, it's a good way to do it. And also, we were asked to do something like that in Seoul. Here you see Seoul-lo, the way to Seoul, it's called. This was an inner city motorway going over the infrastructure at Central Station, Seoul. And the city organized a competition to turn this into a park. The mayor said, I want to have a High Line, but I don't want to have a High Line like in New York. I want to have a very specific High Line. As we always start a little bit with urban planning. We looked into the green in the neighborhood, and of course there was a big gap in the middle where this bridge was. We also saw that the pedestrian life was very underdeveloped there. It's city center, but no pedestrians. And how can we make this better? How can we put it all together with this park? And in what way as well? And how do we make it specific for Seoul? Specific for Seoul was easy in the end. We looked into what could grow on the bridge, and we found really, really a lot that can grow on this bridge. And so we just use it all. And as a botanic garden in the Korean alphabet from A to Z, as a big barcode, you can then walk through everything that grows in Seoul over this walkway. We couldn't put earth on top of this bridge because the bridge was too weak. So like the High Line in New York, that we couldn't do. But we could work with flower pots. And so we also designed lots of flower pots in all kinds of sizes, perfect for the plants. And also furniture, activators we call them, small shops, museums, shadow things, fountains, all these things. And this is how we build it. And here you can see it, how it's working right now. Here's one of the cafes and a stage and the tourist information. It starts at ground level. You can sit on all of these flower pots. Here's the stage to dance. They like to dance outside, the Koreans. The paddle pool where it goes over the road. Bit of shadow. They don't like sun because of the complexion. And here's the natural information center. You can see down onto the traffic. You can enjoy the green in the middle of the city center. And it's very well used. More than 1 million people use it now every month, and lots of people take selfies, of course. Movies have been made there. Superman is killing it in one movie, so it's kind of successful. Here it's going through a piece of downtown, and quite a few buildings, they got bridges, as you can see here. These buildings were only for 10% rented out. After Seoul, they're all full. One of them has turned into a hotel, another one has turned into a shopping center, so it goes very well. From being a nuisance, it actually turned, like in New York, into something good. You see people enjoying the look of this bridge, and it's very, very busy, sometimes even too busy, as you can see. And all these people, they represent economy. That's very important because they are here, they could possibly spend money here. So when the city looked into the effect of this park, they found out that they gave a very big present to the owners of the real estate on both sides of this park because their buildings were much, much more value. And this is kind of new because you've been always told that the more cars you have, the better the business is. But now in certain city centers, we notice that it's the other way around. Also in Madrid, maybe you saw it, there is an article on Forbes that says that there was an 8.9% increase in retail sales because they banned the car from the city center. So we can do it, especially in Vienna where you have such a lovely city center. Maybe you can even go further than what you already have. Okay, more bricks. This is a very posh residential road in Amsterdam. It's called PC Hoofdstraat. And even after the war, it was still residential. And then slowly, it transformed into being the most expensive shopping street of the Netherlands. We are a Protestant country, so we don't need more than one of these streets. So we only have one Prada store, one Chanel, and so on. But we have more and more visitors. The city had invested into many museums, and now the city also wants to have bigger shops so that the Chinese tourists actually can buy everything they want, that they don't have to go to Paris to go to Chanel, but they can also buy it in Amsterdam. So this is what they dream of, but then they are faced with these small Dutch houses, which we love, by the way. So our client had these two white houses, and for whatever reason, the city gave him a permit to demolish them, which in a way is sad, but they wanted to have these big flagship stores. So he got a permission, and he instantly removed them before the city would reconsider. So that was done. And then, to his great surprise, he couldn't get a permit to build something new, because all the plans he came with, the city didn't like. So then he came to us, and we said, well, then it's very simple. Why don't you just build what was there before? So, okay, it's too small. Yeah, stretch it, then it will fit. Okay, but then I still miss the shop window because I need a big shop window. Okay, why don't you just build the stretched building out of glass? Totally glass. Okay, why not? We went to the city with this plan, and the city said, yeah, we love it, it's cool, but it's not allowed. It's against the law, okay? Yeah, because in Amsterdam law, it says you have to be behind bricks. This is bricks. It's glass bricks. Yeah, no, it says ceramic bricks. So you have to be behind, you have to live behind ceramic bricks, okay? So that's what the city wanted. And we like data, so we looked into all the building permits the city had given up in the last 5 years in this neighborhood, and we found out that indeed sometimes the percentage of brick was 36%, but in many, many cases it was also down to 16%. So then we thought, okay, if we make 16% normal brick and the rest will be glass, then maybe we can get away with it. So, and this is what we did. So here is the plan. We went to the city, and they said, no, you can't do that with brick. And said, yes, we can. Look, this is what you allowed in the past. So then they couldn't say no anymore, and we had a permit to build this thing. And that was a problem in itself because we didn't know how to do that. So we went to the specialists in Murano, and we found a family company that can actually make glass bricks. And the problem with glass bricks is not so much that you make them, but that they have to be really precise, because they are quite heavy. These actually more than 3 kilos. If you stack a few of them on top of each other, and there's a grain of sand underneath, then they will all break. So it needs to be super precise and super perfect. And they could do it, so that was great. And then the second problem was the cement. So you don't want to have it like in these 1970s glass bricks that are connected with a bad cement in between. We wanted the cement to be also see-through. How to do that? So at Delft University, we asked around, and then we did a research project together with ABT engineers, and they looked into dental glue. Dental glue, a bit like at your dentist. So you first put it on, and then you need some UV light. Takes 20 minutes per brick, but then it's really rock solid. So you can even turn it into a table. You can also put it into this measuring thing, and it's actually as good as concrete. Reinforced concrete has the same strength as this. Now then the question was, could we do this for the entire facade? The stress diagram already suggests it can't be done. The red would break, so then we needed some extra support, and that was it. So we ordered all the glass from Italy. It came in big boxes, and we had by then already built the rest of the building. And you see here, it's very beautiful. It's very see-through, connected with glass glue. So the building was done, and then we had to make it very clean because no dust was allowed. The construction site was behind this tent. From the inside, you can't see it here, but the construction workers actually wear white gloves so that there is no grease on the wrong side, which then will be forever preserved. And they needed indeed 20 minutes for each brick, and they built the facade, then it was shown. And then to our big surprise, it turned out that the first tenant, Chanel, didn't need that much space. So they put on the first floor a plasterboard wall behind the... So, okay. Okay, good Chanel. But Chanel is now out, and it's being transformed into Hermes shop. I hope that they need a bit more space, but this is how it works. You see, it's a copy of a classic Dutch facade. Slightly green, but not too green. It's very white glass, but a lot of it, so there's always a little bit of color. And people see it, they're surprised, and then they go there, they touch it. Chanel needed to clean it a lot, and this is how it actually fits into this historical environment without being too present in a way, because you also don't want to destroy this historical neighborhood. But it's also not a nostalgic thing, it's actually quite modern and contemporary on one side. On the other hand, it respects the past. I'll end with a project in Rotterdam, post-industrial city, the Markthal. Rotterdam used to be this medieval transport city, then became large in the Industrial Revolution, but it was one of the first victims to the Second World War in Western Europe. So after the war, the city looked like this. The city center was lost, flattened. Our construction site is there in the red in front of this High Line. When the high-speed train came through, they actually removed the High Line and turned it into a square, and we were left with a lot of space in the city center. Also, Rotterdam, after the war, had only 20,000 inhabitants in the city center, and they wanted to add more. So, what to do? The city had suddenly this landing spot in the city center, almost like a runway, and they noticed that if they have a market there, it actually makes the city much nicer, a lot of life suddenly. And in 2004, they had the great idea to have a covered market. And a covered market that should be open every day, so that every day you would have more life in this part of the city center. It also needed to be combined with apartments, because they wanted to have more people, but also they didn't have money. So they asked developers to come up with ideas with architects, but also with a financial proposal. So we were called by a developer from The Hague called Provast, and they said we should build a market hall in Rotterdam. We said, okay, we can try, but we don't have market halls in the Netherlands. So how do we do that? Why don't we fly to Barcelona and have a look how the professionals do it? Now, and this is what we learned, that you can make food look great. We liked it a lot. A Protestant country without a food culture, suddenly it looks really cool. So that is something we learned. We also learned that if you have a supermarket in the market, it works better. We learned that if you close the market, you close the entire neighborhood, so the market needed to be open long every day. And also this, La Boqueria, we learned that it's quite messy. The ceiling is low, and that's not what we wanted. We might tolerate this when on holiday, but if we have to do our shopping, we want to have a clean market, and we have one with high ceiling. So you know how it goes. People are in Barcelona, they drink a little bit of wine, and then they have the first sketch on a napkin. It's really a napkin sketch. So that was the idea. You have a cathedral for the market, and on top you have something like a Venetian palace where basically you have all the housing. Developer happy, went back to The Hague, we have a winner. And then his colleagues said, no, this is way too expensive, you can't do that. Because in Rotterdam at that time you could buy apartments for 800 euros per square meter, so you could never build such a big structure. Also the market inside, the rent was only 45 euros per day per stand, so for that money you cannot build a building. So that was a problem. And the developer was very kind, they made us a counter offer that they could actually afford. So you see the tiniest possible market hall, condos and rental apartments, all very, very sober. We looked at it and we thought, wow, that's heavy. What do you do with this thing? And instead of using parametric software, we built a model. It was a small model and was done very fast because it's not a difficult shape. It's a U. And the nice thing about a model is you can easily, because it's an object, you can take it and then you can also turn it around. And then what happens if you turn it around? Suddenly you have a market hall. So that was the idea. We went back to the developer, said, can you build this thing? Can you still afford it? They calculated it out and they found out that if they build it in a certain technology, they can actually afford it and they can build it. But then they wanted it to be round so that there would be more light in the apartments, like this. Yes, but what do we do with the elevators? Elevator in, up, okay. And then they liked it and they thought, yeah, can you make it look more like an omega so that we have more space to let in the ground floor? No, maybe not, but maybe we could put it inside. And this is basically how Market Hall was conceived. During a competition in a few weeks only we had, and we won the competition. And then we had to build it, and we built it exactly in this method that the developer said, and also in a way that you see here. It's two independent buildings to the top, connected with only one layer of bridge. And here we use apartments as walls, and a layer of penthouses as a ceiling. And this is how we then have a 45 by 45 meter, 120 meter deep space as a byproduct. The market hall is almost for free, created by the apartments and also financed by the apartments. That's very nice. And so I walk you through. On the ground floor and first floor, we have the market, so 100 units are there, 20 square meters. And you can have a trip through the world, Basque country, America, Dutch cheese, of course, you can see, very nice, directly from the farmer, French fries. And then inside the building you have 18 restaurants, very hip restaurants, because Rotterdam is a very hip place nowadays. We have lots of hipsters, especially in restaurants, they seem to be everywhere. And then you have the market hall and how it works. We won the competition with this print also on the outside of the building, but nobody cared, yeah? So people either didn't believe it would happen or they thought it doesn't matter in Rotterdam city center. But then the owner of the shopping center, the market, they said, yeah, we want people to move inside and then take a picture and not take a picture from the outside. And so by doing that, we used just the granite that is in the city, on the sidewalks, also for the facade. And that's how we used it, and it works actually quite well, because now the emphasis is indeed on the interior. It's like a canvas, a neutral canvas that you can see the artwork. The artwork was also a really funny story. The developer called us and said, yeah, we have great news. We can start in 4 weeks with the interior facade. But the interior facade was only in half a year. No, in 3 months. No, 4 weeks, sorry, 4 weeks. Okay, but we don't have an art piece. Yeah, send us what you had in the render. Okay, no, that doesn't work. So in the end, they organized a competition between 10 artists, lost 1 week, and then this artist won with cornucopia. Everything that you can buy on the market falls from the sky down on you, and you're sitting in a meadow looking up, and it's all fantastic and wonderful. It's a 3D animation. He went to Media Market to buy a computer. Very friendly guy at Media Market told him, no, we don't have a computer that big. Okay, then I go elsewhere. Yeah, but mister, we don't even have one that big in the university. It's 11,000 square meter of computer animation. You cannot calculate this in the Netherlands. So he had 3 weeks to go. Then he went to Google, and he found out that Pixar has these computers. So he then called Pixar. They said, yeah, sure, we can do it. So he designed in Rotterdam, sent it to Hollywood. From Hollywood, it was sent to Buenos Aires and to New Zealand, calculated out on render farms, sent back to Hollywood, sent to an aluminium print factory in Rotterdam, and then it was mounted on 1.5 meter tall aluminium plates. And while he had to deal with this problem, in 3 weeks' time only, the people who ran the shopping center, they had a bit of an idea about Rotterdam. They noticed that Rotterdam is a multicultural society and that more than half of the population has a migration background. So they called him and said, you know, we have quite a few of Muslims in the city, and maybe we shouldn't have pork chops. Okay, so he got rid of all the pork chops, had to redo a few designs, but was okay. 2 days later, they called and said they found out that we also have a big Hindu community in the city. They understand that there are no steaks in the print anymore. There's one cow, but it's a milk cow, and it's being treated very well. And then they called and said, well, we found out that market research said that the Dutch people think that chicken comes from bioindustry, which is true. So he had to remove most chicken. Eggs are okay, but not chicken. And then, so that was it. He had hoped. And then they called again and said that they've been thinking that some people are not so happy about the insects. He said, yeah, but the insects, they're part of Dutch classic art work. They represent our Protestant faith that we can show beautiful things. But if you put a few insects on it, they represent death, and they remind you that you have to work hard to secure a place in heaven. I mean, the Catholics are easier. You just have to go and tell, I've been bad, now we have to work. So therefore insects. Then they said, yeah, that's all nice and cool, this tradition, but there are people that have an allergy to wasps. And how do you walk into this market hall and then there is a 5 meter tall wasp over your shoulder? Maybe you don't want to buy anything anymore. So they, in the best Dutch way, they had a committee of everybody who was talking about insects that are good and insects that are bad. And in the end, they found a solution. And the artist is a very patient guy. That's him, actually. Arno Kuhne, and he did all that in 3 weeks' time, which is really amazing, and it works very well. And we, of course, we had to help him a little bit by making it visible. We had this big window during competition. We didn't know how to solve it, but there was a nice engineer who could do it for us, and he found out that maybe we could use steel cables for this facade, and only single glazed. Single glazed means that you don't have heating and cooling inside, like in a market in Barcelona. And the steel cables, they add a lot of flexibility, which means that we don't have a structure, which is really nice because we didn't want to have a structure. We want to have a really transparent window. Okay, so if a heavy storm hits this window, it can be pushed into the structure 1 meter. So it means that all the steel cables are 8 centimeters longer. So that's really good. He was called Engineer of the Year for this idea. This is how it works. So you have a cross of the steel cables. There's a bolt on it. The bolt keeps 4 corners of the glass. And in between you have silicon, and that adds this flexibility, which is a very good solution and also not really expensive. Also here, I mean, we had to really deal with very low budgets. We built this entire thing for 1,750 euros per square meter, and there are 4 layers of basement underneath, which were crazy expensive. Here is where the fresh air comes in, right underneath this facade, and it leaves all by itself. There is no help, no mechanical ventilation, no airco, only a little bit of heating should it really, really be so cold that the produce starts to freeze. So that's how Markthal works. It also has BREEAM very good, but that's mostly because the apartments are quite okay. The secret to the success of Markthal is in the basement. Imagine you live above a market hall. At 4 o'clock in the night, the delivery starts with the little white vans. So that we didn't want, because then people are woken up by these deliveries. So we put the delivery in the first basement, right next to the supermarket, which was also important, so that we have more visitors in the building. We were really scared that there were not enough visitors. And only the supermarket doesn't come with small lorries. Everybody comes with small cars. Supermarket comes with the big ones. And so they got a special delivery hatch, an elevator in front of the building, but they can only come during office hours. And then we have a super big parking garage, which serves an entire part of the city center, not just the market hall. It's actually the biggest in Rotterdam. And here in this, now we were not so lucky with making it car-free, but then we tried to get the people into the building, into the center with these escalators. It's a museum as well, because we found so many art pieces that we could show. You see them here. They are also shown underneath the stairs without air conditioning, so they're continuously changed, this museum display, in order to not be damaged, but also in order to not have an airco there. In Markthal, of course, you can live. The apartments, they were kind of paying for everything. We have 228, 102 are social housing, so the rent is kind of moderate for the city center. And we have 6 cores. Per core, mostly, we have 4 apartments. Most apartments have, all the apartments have a balcony and window to the city, to the outside. And then quite a few also to the inside. And this was the dream we had, that you could open the window to the market, you could lower a bucket with a few euros, they could put fish in, you could bring it up. Of course, the insurance said no, because if you throw the bucket out on the street, it's your mistake. If you throw it into the market, it kills someone, it's the market's mistake. So that's how secured insurances work. But in this way, we have now closed windows, triple windows, so you can see the market, but you cannot hear it, you cannot smell it. And from the rooms, you have a wonderful view of this market hall. The further you go up, the further it inclines. This is one of the social houses, and the people, they look down into the market hall, but they also have windows to the outside. That's always, of course. Then on top, we have 28 penthouses. And we didn't want to have an elevator core on top of the building. It needed to be beautiful also for the towers that are all around. So the people have to walk. This is Nicole. She lives in one of the penthouses, very big. So they have to basically walk up the stair next to a window to the market. And then in the back you see one of the, because the penthouses are very, very deep, they needed to have an extra light courtyard to bring in light into the bedrooms. You see here one of them. So they have rabbits and palm trees, and they're standing on a glass that shows you the market underneath. 45 meters. Grown ups are always really, really scared. So in order to tell them that it's not dangerous at all, we used the baby to show that it's all right. The baby actually liked it a lot, so then nobody else should be scared. So this is how we made Market Hall. And then something interesting happened. It was one of the many projects of Rotterdam. Rotterdam had 25 years of urban renewal behind it. In the 80s, there was a drug problem. It was a very bad city, very poor. And we are still the poorest city of the Netherlands, but we have really tried to make it different. And that happened for 25 years, was a best kept secret. And then something happened. The national television said, come to Roffa. Roffa is the rough name of Rotterdam. And they said that maybe because of this building, out of all the tourists that come to the Netherlands every year, 350,000 usually go to the port of Rotterdam. Maybe there will be 50,000 extra per year to come and visit this building. We were very happy, champagne in the office, that was cool. And then we thought, wow, maybe the Queen wants to open the building. So we asked the royal family whether the Queen would be so kind to open the building, knowing that she only opens museums and things like that, and nothing as vulgar as a market. So she came, and at the time news, so the Queen said yes, she came. She had a lot of fun, as you can see. Here the Queen is, and we all sang for her, which the Queen likes. And then she opened the building like Cinderella with the pumpkin, and she walked through the building with our very happy clients, sandwiched by them, and that was a very lovely day. On the outside, it was even nicer because the people of Rotterdam had now waited 10 years for this building. 5 years of planning, 5 years of construction. And then they wanted to go in. The doors opened, the doors broke, the escalators broke, and the fire department had a nightmare day, actually. And that continued for almost a year. We had way too many people in the building. Because of the Queen, and that's the great thing of having a royal family, we had 450 journalists in the building, so in the first 3 weeks we had like 800 articles, some of them comparing the building to the Bilbao Guggenheim, which is not fair because there is no tax money in this building. It's not the same, basically. It was a private development, and but yeah, so you should get yourself a royal family for PR reasons. It's pretty okay. So, and ever since, Markthal has a lot of visitors. They stay 45 minutes in the building, and since 2015, the second year, we have 8 million, and the building was only designed for 3.5 million, which is really nice. And the people, they come for more than half from Rotterdam, but almost half, 47%, are tourists, which is really new for the city. And they stay 45 minutes in the building, maybe an hour and a half, and then they still have 2 days to discover Rotterdam, to discover that's a nice city, and it has really, really changed the city incredibly. So it wasn't just this building, but the building is like out there and say, please come, and then the people saw that it's actually a really nice city where you can spend time. And that was new for us in Rotterdam because we were mostly famous for right-wing politicians, for drugs, for the youngest hooligans in Europe. That's a real image, not a fake. And then suddenly we became part of this Lonely Planet, and not as the rough choice, but as a please go there, and not just Lonely Planet, but also CNN, The Guardian, New York Times. They all say, come to Rotterdam. And then, of course, more people said it, like Jamie Oliver as well, which is good. He has a restaurant in the building, and it still works. And then we also have lots and lots and lots of people taking selfies. So we collect all these selfies. It's more than 500 a month. And that's a very big compliment that people actually like to take a building onto their stream, their social media, that it's a building that is so nice that they actually like to show it off, and that they're happy, and they're quite happy there. So that's Markthal. And the next thing we're doing in Rotterdam, and I don't have a lot of time, so I only show you one image, which is the most democratic museum ever. This is Boijmans van Beuningen Museum. It can always show 4% of its collection. It's a municipal collection, and we're now building this object next to it, which is a open art depot. 95% of the collection is in there, and then you can actually go and visit it, and you can see everything. 150,000 objects in 7 climate zones, and it will be open next year. It will take a year to climatize and to put all the art inside, but then the people of Rotterdam can actually, for the first time ever, see the entire collection that they own as citizens of Rotterdam. Thank you very much.